Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with grace, confidence, and silence that echoes louder than words ever could. You see, the world tries to teach us that being constantly available is love, that being always present is loyalty, that giving endlessly is strength. But here's a truth they don't say enough. Your presence should be a privilege, not a guarantee. You are not here to be consumed until there's nothing left of you. You are here to shine so brightly that when you leave a room, people feel it. Your absence should not just be noticed, it should be missed, because that's what impact is. That's what worth feels like. We chase approval, we seek validation, we hustle for spaces that don't know how to hold us. And in doing that, we forget our own value. We give all of ourselves, hoping someone will finally say you're enough. But let me tell you, you've always been enough. You just need to stop offering discounts to people who can't afford you. When someone doesn't value your voice, go silent. When they don't appreciate your energy, step back. When they forget your worth, remind them by disappearing. That space you leave behind, that's where realization happens. That's when they remember who you are. Don't beg for a seat at a table where you bring the entire meal. Don't chase doors that only open halfway. And don't settle for being seen when you deserve to be celebrated. Let them miss you. Let your silence make them question. Let your absence become their lesson. Because when you learn to walk away with your head held high, you stop being an option and start being a memory they can't replace. Value comes from presence, but impact comes from absence. Written in a tone that mirrors Priyanka Chopra's bold, self-assured style. There are no subheadings or ending phrases, just a strong, continuous narrative as requested. There's a difference between being seen and being remembered, between being liked and being missed, between showing up and leaving a mark. In a world where everyone is racing to be visible, to be noticed, to be everywhere all the time, we forget that true value doesn't always lie in our presence. Sometimes the loudest message we can send is by stepping away. Sometimes your absence teaches the lesson your presence never could. Being present is important. It builds relationships, creates memories, allows growth, but it's not the only thing. Presence can be comforting, but it can also become expected. Routine, overlooked, and when people get used to your presence, they stop looking at you with the same wonder they once did. That's human nature. We take for granted what we think we'll always have. And the more available you make yourself, the easier it is for others to assume you'll always be there. You respond immediately, you show up even when you're tired, you give without hesitation, you pour and pour until your cup is empty, and still they ask for more. But let me tell you something, people rarely value the things they don't fear losing. Now think about what happens when you remove yourself. Suddenly the silence becomes loud. Your name lingers in their mind because it's no longer echoing in their ear. Your absence starts asking the questions your presence never did. Why isn't she here? Why did he leave? What did I overlook? That's impact. That's when they start to measure what you truly brought into their life. Not when you were always showing up, but when you stopped. Because your presence was a habit. Your absence is a wake-up call. It's not about playing games or manipulating people's emotions. It's about understanding your power. When you give people the gift of your time, your energy, your loyalty, you are offering something sacred. But gifts don't come without responsibility. And if someone treats your presence as ordinary, it's okay to take it away, not as a punishment, but as a reminder that you are not a background character in anyone's life. You are not meant to fill gaps for people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared. Your worth is not in being endlessly available. Your worth is in being unforgettable. Let's not confuse visibility with value. Some of the most impactful people aren't the ones making the most noise. They're the ones whose absence leaves a gap that can't be filled. The ones who walk away and leave people wondering how things felt so different without them. That's not ego, that's not arrogance, that's clarity. It means you were intentional. You didn't just occupy space, You made it better, and when you're gone, it's felt. Think about the great performers, the visionary leaders, the people in your own life who left a lasting impression. What made them unforgettable wasn't just what they did when they were around. It was the space they left behind when they exited. The energy that lingered long after the moment was over. That's legacy. That's what happens when you live with purpose instead of just showing up out of habit. You don't need to be present in every room to be respected. You don't need to speak constantly to be heard. You don't need to always be available to be loved. Sometimes it's the restraint that defines your power, knowing when to engage and when to retreat, knowing when your presence is a gift, and when it's being wasted. That self-awareness, that's strength. That's where you stop being someone who just shows up and start being someone who leaves a mark. The world will often push you to overextend, to give more, do more, be more, until you lose sight of your own boundaries. But boundaries are where your value becomes visible, when you can say, "This is enough," when you can recognize that your worth does not increase with your availability, when you understand that being everywhere isn't a flex, it's a drain. You dilute your power by scattering it, but when you pull back, when you choose to protect your space, your time, your peace, something magical happens. People notice, and if they don't, they were never really seeing you in the first place. Absence makes space for reflection, it reveals truth, it shifts perspective, it creates the silence in which people can finally hear what they were too distracted to notice. That's the difference between being needed and being valued. Need is about convenience, value is about appreciation, and if someone only realizes your importance when you're gone, that doesn't mean you were replaceable. It means you were essential. They just didn't see it soon enough. You owe it to yourself to be more than someone who fills gaps. Be someone who leaves footprints, not by pushing harder or doing more, but by knowing when to step back and let your absence do the talking. Because presence builds connection, yes, but absence builds legacy, and legacy is what lasts. Don't overstay where you're not appreciated, leave a gap that's felt. It maintains the same bold, confident, and emotionally grounded tone as before, without subheadings or a formal conclusion. There's a fine line between being committed and being taken for granted, between showing loyalty and losing yourself. And the truth is, many of us stay too long in places that stopped seeing us a long time ago. We stay in jobs that don't recognize our value, in relationships that don't nurture us, in friendships that drain instead of fill. We convince ourselves that if we just try harder, give more, stay longer, something will change. But here's the reality no one likes to talk about. Not every place deserves you. Not every space is meant to hold you. And overstaying where you're not appreciated doesn't make you noble, it makes you invisible. Appreciation isn't about grand gestures or constant praise. It's about being seen. It's about your effort being acknowledged, your presence being noticed, your energy being respected. When that disappears, when you find yourself constantly showing up and no one seems to care anymore, it's time to ask yourself, what am I really doing here? Because staying where you're not valued doesn't just rob you of time. It slowly chips away at your self-worth. It teaches you to settle, to shrink, to accept crumbs and call it love, loyalty, or purpose. We live in a world that romanticizes struggle, that glorifies endurance. Stick it out, be the bigger person, stay loyal no matter what. But loyalty to others should never come at the expense of loyalty to yourself. You are not meant to be a placeholder in anyone's life. You are not here to prove your worth over and over again to people who refuse to see it. The spaces that are meant for you will recognize you without begging. The people who truly value you won't let you wonder where you stand. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave, walk away, not because you're weak or bitter, but because you finally understand your value. And when you do it with quiet confidence, with dignity, with peace, that's when your absence starts to speak volumes. That's when the gap you leave becomes louder than any words you could have said. Think about this. How many times have you been the one who stayed behind when everyone else gave up? the one who kept showing up, kept pouring, kept trying to hold something together that was already broken. And how many times did that make a difference? If it did, great. But if it didn't, if your effort only led to more disappointment, more silence, more disrespect, then maybe staying wasn't the answer. Maybe the real power is in knowing when to stop. Knowing when you've done enough, when the return on your emotional investment has run dry. Leaving isn't failure, leaving is clarity. It's saying, I've given my best, and now I give myself permission to move on. It's knowing that your energy is sacred, and you're no longer willing to waste it on places or people who can't even say thank you. Because when you remove yourself from those spaces, something powerful happens. You reclaim your voice. You make space for what's meant for you, and most importantly, you remind the world, and yourself, that you are not disposable. Some people will only realize your worth once you're gone, once the texts stop coming, once the help is no longer there, once your name isn't on the list of people they can count on anymore, and while that realization might come too late for them, it's right on time for you, because finally you see it, you feel it, you understand that your presence was never the problem. It was their lack of appreciation that was. There's dignity in the exit, not in the drama, not in the noise, but in the decision to no longer explain yourself, to no longer stay and fight for scraps of recognition, to no longer pour into cups that never pour back. And when you go, don't just disappear, elevate. Let them feel the absence. Let them look around and realize something's missing. Let that empty space carry your name. Let that silence be your legacy. We're so afraid to walk away because we confuse leaving with giving up. But they're not the same. Giving up is surrendering to fear. Walking away is choosing self-respect. It's knowing that your growth, your peace, and your sanity matter more than someone's inability to see your worth. And the right spaces, the ones that deserve you, will never make you beg to be seen. They'll never let you overstay because they'll always be asking you to stay a little longer. There's strength in staying, yes, but there's wisdom in knowing when to leave. And the most unforgettable people in this world, they're the ones who don't just occupy space. They leave a hole when they're gone. They're the ones whose absence makes people stop and think, not because they left in anger, but because they left with grace. Because they knew their value, and they refused to keep shrinking to fit places that were never meant to hold them. So don't overstay, not in rooms that drain you, not in relationships that dismiss you, not in roles that don't reflect who you are. Leave that space, let them feel it, let them miss you, not because you vanished, but because your presence always mattered more than they realized. Be unforgettable by being intentional in your actions. It carries the same powerful, unapologetic tone, confident, emotional, and laced with self-respect and clarity. No subheadings or ending lines, just a strong and continuous narrative. In a world obsessed with being seen, most people forget what truly makes someone unforgettable. It's not about being loud. It's not about always being the center of attention. It's not about being in every conversation, every event, every photo. It's about presence with purpose, intention, the quiet power of someone who knows exactly who they are, what they bring, and where they're going. That kind of person doesn't need to scream to be remembered. They move with meaning, and every step leaves a mark. Intentional people don't chase validation. They don't need constant applause. They're not trying to impress everyone, because they know that when your actions come from clarity, not everyone will understand, and that's okay. They understand that being unforgettable isn't about being popular. It's about being real, being consistent, being aligned. When you're intentional, your energy doesn't just pass through a room, it lingers. It leaves people thinking, feeling, remembering. Think about the people who have stayed with you long after they left the room. The ones who said very little, but every word landed. the ones who didn't need to prove themselves because their presence was the proof. That's what intention does. It removes the noise, it removes the performance. It removes the mask. When your words are chosen with care, when your actions are aligned with your truth, when your presence is rooted in purpose, you don't just exist, you resonate. So many people waste their energy trying to be everything for everyone. They shapeshift, they overextend, they say yes out of fear, not choice, and then they wonder why they feel exhausted, invisible, replaceable. But when you act from intention, you become undeniable. Because you stop moving to fit in, and you start moving to stand out, not with ego, but with identity, with conviction. Intention is powerful because it's rare. Most people act on impulse, on pressure, on autopilot. They're reacting instead of choosing. They're performing instead of expressing. But the ones who rise above the noise are the ones who ask themselves, why am I doing this? What am I trying to say here? What do I actually want to leave behind in this moment? That awareness becomes power. That clarity becomes memory. That truth becomes legacy. Being intentional doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean you'll always have it together. It means that even in your mess there's meaning, even in your flaws there's purpose, because when you move with intention, everything you do, even the mistakes, becomes part of your story, not your shame. And that's what people remember. They don't remember who was always polished. They remember who was real, who showed up, who made them feel something. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to have a reason. Don't just show up because you feel like you should. Show up because you have something to offer. Don't just speak because you can speak because it matters. Don't just chase opportunities blindly. Move in alignment with what feeds your spirit, your growth, your truth. Because when your actions are intentional, you stop being just another face in the crowd. You become someone they can't forget. People think being unforgettable is about doing big things, but it's often the small moments done with care that leave the deepest impressions. The way you listen, the way you remember someone's name, the way you show up for someone without being asked, the way you stay true to your word, even when it's inconvenient, that's intention, that's presence. That's power. The truth is, anyone can be seen. Social media proves that every day, but not everyone will be felt. Not everyone will be remembered, because being seen is about attention, but being unforgettable is about impact. And impact doesn't come from doing the most. It comes from doing what matters, from knowing who you are and owning it without apology. This world is full of noise, distractions, and constant motion. People forget what they saw yesterday because they were already on to the next thing. But when you live with intention, you cut through the noise, you slow it down, you become the person they think about later, wondering why your words stuck with them, why your presence felt different, why your absence feels heavier than they expected. So the question is not, how can I be remembered? The question is, what am I offering that's real? What am I giving that comes from truth? When you stop chasing attention and start offering value, people feel the shift. They may not always say it, but they know. They feel your integrity. They feel your purpose. They feel that you weren't just passing through. You were here fully, and that is what makes you unforgettable. Don't perform, don't please, don't overdo, be intentional, be present, be true, and trust that when your actions come from a place of meaning, you'll never have to worry about being forgotten. Let your silence speak volumes when your presence is taken for granted. The tone continues to be fierce, introspective, emotional, and self-assured. No subheadings, no conclusion, just one powerful, flowing piece. Silence is misunderstood. People think silence means weakness. That if you're quiet, you're lost. That if you don't respond, you don't care. That if you walk away without a word, you've surrendered. But silence, when used with intention, is one of the most powerful tools you have. Especially when your presence has been taken for granted. There comes a point where words stop working, where explanations start to feel like begging, where your voice begins to echo in a room full of people who no longer listen. That's when you stop speaking, not because you don't have something to say, but because you realize they're not worthy of hearing it. Silence in those moments becomes strength, it becomes clarity, it becomes your boundary. When people are used to you always being available, always responding, always showing up, your silence disrupts the pattern. It creates space they didn't expect. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to ask questions they were avoiding. That discomfort, that space, that's the message. That's your energy shifting from noise to presence. You're no longer explaining. You're no longer convincing. You're letting your absence speak where your voice no longer could. You don't owe people endless explanations for your worth. You don't have to keep proving your loyalty just because someone keeps forgetting it. And you definitely don't have to keep repeating yourself to someone who only hears you when it's convenient. There's something powerful in saying nothing at all, in stepping back, in reclaiming your energy with silence so loud it roars. We are conditioned to think that communication always means talking, always means fixing, always means doing the emotional labor. But silence is a language too. It says, I'm done trying to be heard in places that only respond when it's already too late. It says, I love myself enough to walk away from anything that asks me to shrink. It says, you no longer have access to the parts of me you couldn't appreciate. When you're being taken for granted, words often bounce off the walls. You could pour your heart out and still, nothing changes. But when you go silent, when the texts stop, when your energy disappears, when your constant yes turns into distance, they notice. Maybe not immediately, but eventually, because people feel silence in places they've grown used to sound. They feel your absence in ways they never respected your presence, and silence isn't always cold. It's not cruel, it's not manipulative, it's honest. It says, I've tried. It says, I've given more chances than I should have. It says, I'm no longer investing where there's no return. Sometimes, silence is the most respectful thing you can offer to others and to yourself. It gives space, it gives clarity, and in that space, people start to realize what they lost. They start to remember what they ignored, and they begin to understand that not everyone will wait forever to be appreciated. You don't need to announce your departure. You don't need to argue one last time. You don't need a dramatic monologue to justify your decision. Just go quiet. Just stop pouring. Just let go. And trust that silence will do what your words couldn't shift the energy. Move the story, redefine the dynamic, because when someone is used to your light always being on, they will notice when the switch is flipped. The silence doesn't just speak to them, it speaks to you. It allows you to breathe, to listen to your own thoughts again, to remember what you sound like when you're not constantly overextending for others. It becomes a reset, a declaration, a return to self. That's the kind of silence that heals, the kind that says, I am done performing for people who refuse to see the show. And let's be clear, being silent doesn't mean you're suppressing your truth. It means you've already spoken your truth, and now you're choosing peace over repetition. You're choosing stillness over shouting. You're choosing dignity over desperation. That is not silence out of fear. That is silence rooted in power. People will test your boundaries when they think your love is unconditional, when they think your patience has no end, but silence says otherwise. It says, my love is deep, yes, but it's not blind. It says, I will give you all of me, but only while you know how to hold it. And if they can't, then you leave, with grace, with peace, and with the kind of silence that lingers long after you've gone. You are not here to beg for appreciation. You are not here to speak louder just to be heard. You are not here to convince someone that your presence is a gift. You are the gift, and the moment someone forgets that, the moment your light starts feeling invisible, that's when silence becomes the most powerful thing in the room. Let it speak, let it echo, let it remind them what your words could never make them understand. Not because you wanted revenge, not because you wanted attention, but because you finally chose you. Walking away isn't weakness, it's power. The tone remains confident, empowering, and emotionally rich, with a focus on self-respect and personal strength. Walking away isn't a sign of defeat. It isn't a sign of failure. It's not giving up or admitting that you've lost. Walking away is a declaration. It's a powerful statement to the world that you know your worth, and you refuse to settle for anything less. It's understanding that the power doesn't lie in staying where you're not appreciated. It lies in knowing when to leave and leaving on your own terms. Too often, we are taught that strength means sticking around, weathering storms, enduring pain, and sacrificing our peace. We're taught that if we just hold on a little longer, if we just keep fighting, if we just stay one more day, things will change. But what they don't tell us is that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of the profound recognition that you are deserving of more. You are worthy of love, of respect, of reciprocity. And if the people, situations, or environments around you can't give that, then walking away is not just an option. It's your right. Walking away is not about quitting. It's about protecting your peace. It's about setting boundaries that honor your self-worth. It's about saying, I won't sacrifice my mental, emotional, or physical well-being for people or situations that drain me. And that takes strength. That takes courage, because it's easier to stay. It's easier to tolerate discomfort than to face the unknown. But true power comes from knowing that you are not obligated to stay in places that no longer serve you. Every time you walk away from something that no longer aligns with your values, every time you say no to what drains you, you are making space for something better. You are declaring to the universe that you won't settle for less than what you deserve. And it is in that space that true power is born. It's in the decision to move forward, to choose yourself, to prioritize your own growth and happiness over the fear of being alone or the discomfort of change. People will tell you that walking away is weak. They'll say that you're giving up, but they don't understand. They don't understand that sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. It's the ultimate act of self-love. It's the ultimate expression of your belief in your own worth. It says, I am worthy of respect. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of the life I am meant to live, and I won't stay anywhere that tells me otherwise. In relationships, whether personal or professional, people often push boundaries, take you for granted, or make you feel as though you need to constantly prove your value. But walking away isn't a sign of weakness. It's a recognition of what you deserve. When you stay in these situations too long, when you keep giving without receiving, you lose yourself. You forget what you're capable of. You start believing that maybe you aren't worthy of more, or maybe you don't deserve peace. But walking away reminds you of who you are. It brings you back to your center. It reconnects you with your power. You see, strength isn't about tolerating endless disrespect. Strength isn't about constantly giving and never receiving. Strength isn't about staying in a place where you're invisible, overlooked, or undervalued. Real strength comes from knowing when to stand up and say, I will not tolerate this any longer. Real strength is walking away from situations that diminish your worth, even when it feels like the hardest thing to do. The world often tells us that to be strong, we need to fight for what we want. We need to keep pushing, keep proving ourselves, keep striving. But real strength is in knowing when to release, when to let go, when to walk away, when to stop fighting a losing battle. Walking away is not about weakness. It's about acknowledging that you are no longer willing to invest in something that doesn't reflect your value. And when you do that, you reclaim your power. It's easy to stay in familiar places even when they're not healthy. It's easy to stay with people who are comfortable even when they're not uplifting. It's easy to stay stuck in situations that have become toxic because at least they're predictable. But the true act of courage is stepping into the unknown. It's walking away with the belief that something better, something aligned with your true self is waiting for you. And by leaving, you make room for that. You make room for growth. You make room for peace. You make room for people who will see your worth and appreciate you for exactly who you are. When you walk away, you free yourself. You stop living in the shadows of unappreciation. You stop pretending that everything is fine when you know deep down that it isn't. And as you walk away, you open the door for new opportunities, new relationships, and a future that is aligned with who you are and what you deserve. There's power in walking away. There's power in knowing when to let go. And when you finally step into that power, you'll realize that you were never weak for walking away. You were powerful for choosing yourself. You were strong for understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, with your head held high, and let the world see your strength in action.